I'm a podcaster, and my grandsons help me produce. And they give me two pieces of advice. The first one is don't bury the lead, and the second one is don't worry about the ending because nobody's going to get to it. So the lead is that this talk is all about collaborating with patients, caregivers, and their clinician partners when developing and evaluating tools to inform health and care decision making. That's what this talk is about. I'm a two-legged cisgender old white man of privilege and who has MS, and I've been care partner to my grandmother, my mother, and a son's end-of-life journey. I'm a nurse. I have led a couple of EHR implementations. I have been in the C-suite of healthcare as a VP of quality management, and I've been consulting. I wear a lot of hats, hence health hats. So when I was diagnosed with secondary progressive MS, my neurologist said, you don't know anything about multiple sclerosis, and I know a lot about multiple sclerosis, and I don't know anything about you. So your job is to learn about multiple sclerosis, and my job is to learn about you. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And he said, okay, so when you come back, I want you to tell me what's important to you. And I talked to my wife and my kids, and I came back with, I want to progress as slowly as possible. I want to stay safe. I want to keep playing my saxophone, and I don't want to mess with my pathological optimism. And he said, we can work with that. And he especially liked the saxophone part because I have intercostal breathing involvement, and I'm playing this big old horn. And I have dexterity issues, and I'm playing this big old horn with heavy keys, and it's creating new brain pathways. And he said, I got nothing that compares to that. Nothing that I have to offer you is gonna make any difference, any more difference than that. So, as you can probably tell, I'm an activated patient, and you may be an activated patient. You're certainly an activated informaticist, or you wouldn't be here. Activated people are disruptors, and they are most likely to use the products that you work on, and they're going to make them better. So, the rest of this presentation will help you to know what is and to assess what's going on in your shop, and then you can decide what to do next and how to adapt. Now, my son, who is in that picture with my wife and I, he's the young man who died when he was 26. He said, we have the same superpower, and the superpower is accepting what is and adapting. Okay, so first, we are people. And what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to take a couple of minutes and for you to pretend you're in your place of worship and you're going to say hello to the person next to you, and you're going to ask them, when did you first realize that health was fragile? And those of you that are virtual, you can put that in the chat. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes so you can say that to each other. That was fun, wasn't it? Okay, so the bottom line here is that we're beginning right now with self-knowledge. You learned a little bit about me. You just learned a little bit about each other. We're going to focus on the triads of deciders: patients, caregivers, and their clinician partners. We're going to appreciate people who hack healthcare. We're going to talk about engagement as a dynamic of power. We're going to think about the infrastructure that collaboration operates in, and I'm going to encourage you to take one more step in your collaborations. Now, so we're all informaticists, and I really believe in bobbleheads. And so these bobbleheads that you see here I can see from my desk. And bobbleheads are important because it gives me, when I'm doing my work, it's like, who's my audience? And to help me think about who my audience is. You might think of them as personas, or you might think of them as use cases. But the diversity of people is just amazing. I find it helps me to think about bobbleheads. And so there's Scarecrow. And Scarecrow, if I only had a brain, and I think that one of the things informaticist does is develop clinical decision support systems. Then you see Rosie the Riveter. Now, some of you know who Rosie the Riveter is. My mother-in-law was a Rosie the Riveter. She worked in an automobile plant in Buffalo. So she was a literal Rosie the Riveter. And Rosie the Riveter is about worker empowerment. And they train healthcare staff on new technologies. And then you have Shuri the Avenger. Now, my grandkids introduced me to Shuri the Avenger. It's based on a Marvel comic. James Bond character Q is a tech-savvy princess. And we implement and optimize electronic health records. And then there's Dana Scully. And if you don't know who Dana Scully is, was an FBI agent in the X-Files. And she's about hard science. She's a skeptic. And then when she agrees, she's all in. Nurse informaticist. So now we have a sense a little bit about who we are. Now, making decisions in healthcare is a lot like putting in a kitchen. There are never-ending decisions to make. The cabinets, the workflow, the appliances, are you going to use gas or electric, the hardware, the budget versus what you want. And healthcare, making informed health and care decisions is a lot like that. My wife and I made decisions about our kitchen together, which really meant she made the decisions. And I cared about a few things. I cared about that heavy things were low. I cared about the lighting, and I cared that we had the best hardware possible and that there was plenty of room to move around. But otherwise, she made all the decisions. And it's similar with making healthcare decisions. Like, I vetted and I trust my wife and my partner clinicians, and except for the few things that are important to me, I'm happy for them to make the decisions. There's just too many. And it's based on the things I said before. I want to keep playing my saxophone. I want to stay safe. I don't want to mess with my pathological optimism. But as informaticists, we don't know who's making the decisions. So the stuff we work on needs to work for all of those people. So for that whole triad. Now, so let me just tell you, that QR code there on the right will get you to Everything Health Hats, which is me. And the one on the left will get you to this book, Rebel Health, by Susanna Fox. And what Susanna Fox is, she thinks about personas, bobbleheads, use cases as well. And she talks about seekers, networkers, solvers, and champions, which I'm going to let her tell us about it. And the QR code here, this blue one, it will get you to the video that you're going to see right now.
So the first group are seekers. Seekers are people who feel that they're not getting answers to their questions. And the key here is that they get to decide whether their questions are being answered. They get to decide if the information is enough. And they decide to go out on the hunt for more and better information. And it's that spark, that jolt of energy that makes someone become a seeker that I'm really intrigued by. Because often when someone gets hit by a health challenge, they might be too stunned or exhausted to raise their hand and try and go out on the hunt. So that's seekers. They go out on the hunt for information and they don't give up. The second group are networkers. Networkers are people who just naturally learn in community. They can't help but talk to other people, whether online or offline. When they find something useful, they can't wait to share it with their community. They're people who pool resources and create community wherever they go. The third group are solvers attack problems. If they are faced with an assistive device or medical device that isn't working for them, they will try to take it apart and put it back together again. They will hack it, meaning they will try and find an elegant solution as a workaround, which is the original definition of a hack. Solver can also look at a system and see the flaws in it, and again, want to contribute to fixing that system. The fourth group are champions. Champions have access to resources that are generally controlled by mainstream healthcare or mainstream institutions. Things like funding, media attention, regulatory guidance, access to labs and manufacturing facilities or special materials. A champion will look across the landscape, see a patient-led or survivor-led team that has a great idea but is in need of the resource that they control, and they will share it with them. They'll infuse that team with a resource that the patient-led team needs to scale their idea.
I added one, and that is communicators, because I'm a networker, and I'm a networker who communicates. So I blog and I podcast and I video, and communicators are translators that share the right information to the right community in the right channel. Of course, I really like Susanna's definition of hacking. Usually we think of hacking as a criminal who's busting into our system and ransoming it. But I like to think about that hackers are the people who are the most dedicated users of systems, and they modify them for their workflow. They develop workarounds, they have novel uses of the systems, they want more. They identify cracks and flaws in the systems they use. Everybody hacks. The EHR was designed to be a billing system. It is really good at billing. They added regulatory because they had to. And then they shoehorned in clinical. And patients and caregivers are way down the list. So it is no wonder that you need to hack the EHR. It's a setup for hacking. So I've done all sorts of different hacking. The most simple one is with my son, there was no proxy log on. I used his login and password. With my mother, there was proxy, but it was a pain. And we ignored that and did it that way as well. I don't know about you, but I don't remember a doctor visit. I go, here I am, a nurse, and I've been in healthcare for 50 years, and I go home and I remember at best 25% of what happened. And so I record. I can share with my wife. The hack that I'm playing with now, of course, the shiny object right now is AI. And I keep, since I started with Dr. Kinkle, he was a neurologist, Rip Kinkle, how's that for a name? Rip Kinkle, he was a young curmudgeon. But anyway, when I started with him, I set up a spreadsheet to keep track of what's important to me. It includes the time I play music. It includes the steps I take every day. I try to get 3,500 steps a day in. I include falls, and I include my weight. And so I wanna use Claude, and I wanna create a graphics that I can take to the doctor or whatever clinician I'm going to, and I want it to help me with doctor speak. So far I've failed. I am not a good prompt. I'm still learning prompting, and perhaps I need a solver. But I know this guy who is a designer, and he has two kids with rare diseases. And one of the kids seems to get a new diagnosis every couple of years. And so he is working to collect all the clinical data he sees 12 different specialists, and collect all that information, the clinical record, the images, the lab work, and then there's all the information that he and his wife collect. And he's trying to figure out how to use large language models to prepare to go to the next specialist. So they're going to a cardiologist, and what does he need to bring, and what test results, and what history. It's a mountain of data. And I really hope he is successful on that. Now, we're here because we're all informaticists. And as an informaticist, I'm really intrigued by hacks and workarounds. Now, I have to confess that my staff, not so much. They think workarounds are a pain, and they often saw hackers as the enemy. How do hackers affect you and workarounds affect you? I'm sure they do. I'm sure that people complain about hackers and workarounds. And they're not wrong to be annoyed by it. It's disrupting. And it's disrupting, and it's a problem because healthcare is a factory, right? It's a factory line, and it depends on smooth operation and just and when you're trying to implement something new, how disrupting that is for everybody. But once you start to appreciate the value of hacking and start working with people who are doing the hacking, and so patients, caregivers, and their partner clinicians, and probably you, once you start seeing how people are hacking, well, that helps you then to anticipate the disruptions that might be happening. And what if you had involved them in earlier? What if you had involved them from the beginning? So anyway, I've always found workarounds and hacking to be diamonds. And they point us to what we don't know. And the more I know, the more I don't know. So let's think about collaboration. So I've led 2 EMR implementations. The first one, I had no training in information technology. I've still had no training in information technology. It was like 2008, and I worked for an agency that provided integrated substance abuse services. And we also had a contract to manage the behavioral health benefits for a local insurance company. And we had 2 legacy claim systems that were different, of course, and clinical was all on paper. And my boss, in his wisdom, chose me to lead this implementation. And being the ignorant person that I was, the first thing I did was to invite everybody who was going to touch this system to a seat around the table. So this is patients, caregivers, clinicians, and community partners, as well as the usual suspects of nursing, lab, radiology, registration. And we started before we selected a vendor. And we met weekly for years. And people showed up. And people participated. And I learned how to herd cats. And we implemented a system. And I made one really big mistake, being the ignorant person that I was, is that I didn't clean up the core data sets from these legacy systems. And as you can imagine, having 2 legacy systems and then go live with this new single system, it was a mess. And but I was considered a success. Who knew? And it went live. And I was invited by the health system that we were part of to lead their new transition to a new electronic health system. And I insisted that we clean up the core data sets before we started. That was a fight. And then I wanted to invite everybody who was going to touch it to a seat around the table, and I was not successful. It's too hard to do. And I'd blown all my political capital on the data sets, so we didn't do that. So I was vice president for quality management for an organization called Advocates, Inc. We supported about 40,000 people with disabilities in central Massachusetts. And this was a very interesting organization. And they had patients, clients, residents, whatever you want to call people who they served, participated in every decision-making body that they had, from the board to if they lived in a residence, into the residents' decision-making group. And these are people who had paranoid schizophrenia. There were people with brain injuries. Some people were deaf. Some people were blind. Some people were nonverbal. And they added a lot. Because one of the things that I found being in the C-suite is you hang out with this small group of people and you know what they think and the power dynamics, and it's really hard to get a new idea in a C-suite. And so one of my jobs was to prepare at this Advocates, Inc., was to prepare patients, residents, the consumers, for the board meetings. I also am working with the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, and they're in West Baltimore, and they're really community-based. And they have a community, they have a steering committee. The steering committee is more than 50% consumers. And they do not begin a service or start any research if the advisory board, or the steering committee rather, nixes it. So this is power. Collaboration is about power. It's about ego and power. And the more people hoard power, the less they're able to collaborate. Starting to think about collaboration as a power dynamic, you can see that there's a continuum of power. And giving up power is really hard for people to do, including me and including you. If you're going to collaborate, that means that you're going to listen, and that some of the time people have a better idea than you do, and that means you doing something different. So I've learned now, really, here I am talking about this. You can see I'm really passionate about collaboration. I've done it my whole career. I've experimented with it. But I am not proselytizing to you that collaboration, like where you should be in collaborating with patients, caregivers, and your partner clinicians. Every place is different, and you have to be comfortable with what you're doing. Like, I'm a change agent, and one of the things I've learned as a change agent is you can't be more than 15 minutes ahead of your constituency. And if you are, you got to go back and get them. And that's hard. That's really hard to do. So collaboration occurs in a context. It occurs in a context of values and foundational expectations and infrastructure. So on this slide, there's that QR code will get you to PCORI, Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, which I am on the board of governors. This will get you to their foundational expectations, and I want to highlight 3 of them for you. The first one is diversity and representation. The universe of people is massive. I know it's not PC to talk about diversity anymore. Just think about the language people speak. Just think that there are people who prefer to read, people who prefer to listen, people prefer to watch. People are older, people are younger, people are introverts, people are extroverts. If you're into Myers-Briggs, they're different. They're bobbleheads. People are different, and that's really important, and that's really hard. And how did I get started in this kind of work? I'm health hats, and I'm disabled, and people can check off a lot of boxes. I'm a low-risk participant. And so my job has been to create new seats for people, for more people, and invite them in. So then there's capacity. So at PCORI, people have drunk the Kool-Aid. Everybody from the board to leadership to staff believe in collaboration. And we have money. And then it's now what? And the capacity of ourselves and our partners varies. And so there's a lot of work in terms of developing the capacity to be able to collaborate. And then finally, there's the ongoing review and assessment. because there is no one way to do this. Failure lurks everywhere. I have failed many times. I have been, frankly, if you really want to know, I've been fired twice and I've been laid off twice. And it's not easy, and my goal is to bat 300. So batting 300, if you don't know baseball, that means you fail more than you succeed. And but you keep going. Okay, now we're going to think about infrastructure. So I am blessed to wear many hats. And I've had a 50-year career in nursing, in IT, in quality management and consulting, and I'm committed to collaboration. I've done it. It's just what I do. I've always been this way, and I'm always going to be this way. I often got in my own way. I often didn't have anything that I needed, and really, my best boss told me I was an acquired taste. And my wife says that I need a boss with a lot of self-confidence. And my favorite position was being at the right hand of the boss, because that's where you set the culture of listening, the culture of sharing power, and mutual support and curiosity. And it takes money, and it takes staff, and it takes time. So it's not easy, and it's not for the faint of heart, but it's worth it. Now, I'm going to assume that most of you would like to increase the amount of collaboration and partnership that you do with the triad of decision makers. And if you're not, congratulations, and you should become a mentor. But I would suggest to you that there are some steps you can take. And the first step is, this is lonely work, and you need to have a team who will do this with you. And I don't necessarily mean your informatics team, just some other people in your organization who believe in collaboration with patient caregivers and their clinician partners. A step is to analyze readiness. So that's first yourself. How ready am I for this? How ready is my team? How ready is my hierarchy? And then to analyze that and think about it in terms of the foundations and the infrastructure. And then you just got to start somewhere. And if you don't know, phone a friend and experiment. And when I say experiment, batting 300 is fabulous. Okay. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like you to think about taking one more step. So let's take a couple of minutes and go back to the person that you talked to at the beginning of this presentation and think about what is that next step that you're going to take. And share contact information, and I'd like you to get in touch with each other in about 2 weeks and talk to each other about what you're going to do. And for those of you who are on virtual, you could do this in the chat. I'll give you a couple minutes. Thank you. Okay. What I have here for you is there's a QR code that'll get you to a Google Drive document that has these resources with the links to them. And there's 2 pages here. And what I'd like, if you go there, my email address is there. So if have difficulty or you need any help, you can contact me. But also, if you have resources about collaborating, please add them to this document. And the last thing I would say is that this is lonely work. Even though it's with people, it's lonely work. This is hard, lonely work. The nuances are hyper-local. Your situation is different than anybody else's, but the issues are common. And it is really helpful to have a group. I call them mastermind groups. And I host some mastermind groups. And one of them that this QR code will get you to is a mastermind group that I host, which is researchers who are working on community research partnerships. So I really encourage you to collaborate. And if you're interested, go here and then you'll see what we're doing, and if you'd like to participate, let me know. I really want to thank the audiovisual people for the work that they do, and the hosts, thank you so much for this. And now, I was hoping to leave 15 minutes for questions, but we have 13 and a half. So so that's like batting 300, right?
And I will start with the virtual crowd. Okay. Our first question is, with a workaround, how do you assess the impact of the unintended consequence?
Well, that's a really good question. There's unintended consequences to everything. There is nothing that doesn't have unintended consequences. It's the nature of life. So how do I assess? One of the nice things about workarounds is they're obvious. Like, there they are. So I pay attention. I don't know really what's behind that question, but I'm assuming that it's a little nervousness about it, and it's deserved. We're talking about people and systems. There's a lot to be nervous about.
Yeah. Good answer. Here's the next question. I think you'll enjoy this one. Do you feel as though you're more of a seeker, a networker, a solver, a champion, or a communicator? And the second half of that question is, or are the roles fluid and you've moved through them throughout your career?
I'm a master networker. So I would say if I had to pick one, I would pick that. And I'm a communicator. You know what's important about this is that as a boss, I was really good at strategy and doing something the first time. And then I was ready to get on to the next thing. And I was lazy about maintenance. And so I made sure that I hired people who were anal about maintenance. And they had to be able to stand up to me, because as you can see, I'm a force. And so I would say that what's important about this is that, to me, that's diversity. That's the kind of diversity you need, people who think differently and have different skills.
Very good. Excellent answer. All righty. So the next question is, as both a nurse and someone who has personally navigated the healthcare system with a disability, how do you think we can persuade large healthcare organizations, often driven by metrics and efficiency, to truly value and implement more personal, human-centered approaches to care with patients that don't have the knowledge or the ability to hack? Great.
First of all, everybody has the ability to hack. Hacking is effortless, meaning there is some part of hacking that's effortless, right? It doesn't work. You want something. When I was young, I was really enthusiastic. And I was like, I really wanted to move the world. And now I'm old. And I'm happy with 2 degrees. And so I've changed. And actually, I think it depends on you. You're mostly younger than me. The effect that you have in terms of partnerships is what you do, and hence taking one more step. As far as dealing with the insane, the money, and the incentives that are just crazy, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. But you can make a small impact around you, and you can have partners in doing this, and that is very powerful. And that's how stuff changes.
Very good. Thank you. So the next,
Anybody here, feel free to ask a question.
yes, I was making sure I was roaming the room to make sure I didn't miss
Okay.
anyone. All right, so next question. So this question says, would love to hear an example of a workaround that you've encountered that made the implementation of a new product better or worse.
Okay, that's a good question. I should just have a million answers. I think that when I worked at Boston Children's, I led their patient family experience initiative, and one of the real challenges that we had was that it's a feudal system, Feudal, feudal, in Byzantine, in that there's all these power centers, and it was really hard for people with chronic illnesses have a lot of appointments, and to schedule everything at once. And one of the things, so I led this patient family experience initiative with no staff, which that's a whole discussion. But so I had to build teams, and we decided that from the teams of people who were registrars and appointment makers and clinic managers was to try to figure out how somebody could get their 5 appointments on the same day. And I would say that we failed. We came up with families would work to do that kind of thing when they would do their own workarounds and hacks to get appointments on the same day because they're walking in with 5 other kids. I'm exaggerating, maybe 3 other kids, but still. And so we tried to build a system, and we actually figured out how to build a system, and then nobody wanted to give up power. And so it didn't work. So that was a shame.
All righty. All right, so we are down to 5 minutes, a little more. Anyone in the room have any questions?
Hi, my name is Sim. I'm from Nashville. I think what happened, the challenge that I have is everybody like to start a new idea. We're like, yeah, we're going home, let's start this project. And then we're like, oh, this is your idea. Good, let's do this, let's do that. And then maybe less than 2 weeks, we're like, anybody's there? Nobody's there? It's like everybody wants to start a project. Like they do not know where can I find the resources, how do we keep track of things. And on top of that is that if the project is not getting paid or volunteer work, usually it just gone down the hill in a way. So this is a challenge that I'm facing right now. What are some tricks and tips that you can give it to me so I can keep all these stakeholders, share the resources, and really work on the idea?
Oh man, that's such a good question. you are not alone. I'm an energetic person, you can see. And it's a lot of work to do this kind of thing. And I think one of the things that was successful for me is that I made sure everybody had a voice and I listened. And we did some of the things that people wanted to do. And we were dealing with real problems. I think that the times that I was successful at that is I had a sponsor. I had either a boss or somebody who had more power than me, higher in the hierarchy, and they were also committed. I asked people at the end of every meeting, was this worth your time? And we would just go around the room, thumbs up, thumbs down. And so when somebody did this, which it took them a while to do this, but they did, then we would, okay, so why wasn't it worth your time? And then we would deal with that. It's so local. Partner. That's just so important. Partner with people doing this. This is hard work.
Basis of most of your talk, the collaborating with the triad. I get the collaborating with clinicians, but the collaboration with the patient, and in my realm, I'm in long-term care, it would be collaborating with the residents and family related to the EHR. What parts? I'm not quite sure what I would collaborate with.
What you would collaborate about?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we think about long-term care, so let's see, long-term care.
Keep in mind,
I would say, let me give you an example where that came up when I worked at Advocates, Inc. Advocates, Inc., we had a lot of group homes, and so similar people with some profound disabilities. And one of the things that happened is, as I said, we had people, residents, so I guess in long-term care residents, would be on every decision-making committee. And I remember a meeting where this person just started with this stream of consciousness, and I was early in my career there, and what is this guy talking about? And he just went on and on for a minute and a half. And I looked around the room and everybody was quiet. I'm thinking, they're listening to this guy. And then I started listening to this guy. And then the person who led the meeting said, John, you said a lot there. Let's take a minute and digest that. And then again, it was silent. And I'm like looking around the room and I'm like, it's silent. What's going on here? And then I started thinking about what this person had said and what they said. And then somebody said, John, I think what I'm hearing you say is that it really upsets you that the primary caregiver will all of a sudden leave. They got a new job, and they would be gone, and somebody would replace them. And they're gone, and that's so disruptive. And it was like a no-brainer. We could do better at saying, Danny's leaving, and we'll have somebody new tomorrow, and we'll introduce you. And that came from a long-term care situation. Anyway, there's an example.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
All righty. Thank you, everyone. It looks like we've run out of time.
Oh,
I want to.
we did it.
Yeah.
On time. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for.
Thank you.